Welcome to Smart Franchising with FranSmart. I'm Dan Rowe, and I've masterminded the ascent of local favorites to global dominators. This isn't your usual get-to-know-you chat. We're diving deep. We're revealing the raw truths about franchise wealth building. With over 30 years in the trenches, I'm spilling it all. If you have an appetite for unfiltered tales and the hidden blueprints of franchise prosperity, buckle up. We're diving in. All right, welcome back to Smart Franchising with FranSmart, and today we're talking with Olo founder Noah Glass about Olo, all things food tech, something that I admittedly know little about. More to the point, how to make more money in the restaurant business with food tech, where the industry's going, and how someone should be positioning themselves. So, Noah, it wasn't long ago where people were wondering whether or not they were going to do online ordering or not, or whether they were going to indulge with the off-premise strategies or not. And it's funny to see where things are, but I'd love to hear from you. How about a little bit about your story and a little bit more about Olo?
Yeah, Dan, thank you so much for having me on the podcast. It's fun to do this after knowing one another for so long now. I want to say 15 years at least. So Olo's story actually begins even before we first met. It was back in June of 2005. We're coming up on being 20 years old as a company. And it started with my frustration as a restaurant guest, specifically the guest of a coffee shop that was in my neighborhood in New York City, and all the long lines I had to deal with every morning because everybody wanted to get their coffee at the exact same time. And I happened to be walking around with kind of an early version of a smartphone. Back then, it was a Palm Pilot personal digital assistant. It was a very weird thing to be walking around with as a 23, 24-year-old, but I had one. And I thought, wouldn't it be cool if you could use the magic of e-commerce, of being able to buy something, pay for something, and have it ready and waiting for you with the restaurant industry? And what if I could use this device to enable that? So Olo really started out with mobile ordering as the big intervention in the industry. And things like online ordering had existed before that for pizza specifically as a category. So Olo came into the market and thought, mobile ordering, this device that I came to believe we're all going to have with us at all times, was going to be a game changer in terms of opening up some of the benefits of e-commerce and specifically that guest experience of not having to wait in line or skipping the line on the guest side, and the benefits on the operator side of parallel processing multiple orders as e-commerce merchants were able to do before that for all restaurants, not just pizza restaurants. That was the big aha for me, and what I wound up withdrawing from business school and quitting my job to go and pursue. And that was about 20 years ago. And it, to your earlier point, is amazing to see how far the space has come, how far Olo has come riding that wave, and in the last 4 years doing so as a public company.
Well, and it's amazing because so few people ever start a company. Such a micro, nano percentage of people ever create $1 billion company. You've got $1 billion company. And I remember you sitting in my conference room way back when. That was awesome. In Alexander, Virginia.
Your next door neighbors was one of our early investors.
Who?
Will Dunbar.
Oh, yeah.
So Core Capital was one of our Series A investors back in, I want to say, March of 2008. And that was an incredible funding round to pull off, not to go on too much of a tangent, but it was right during the beginnings of the financial crisis, the Bear Stearns collapse. And that was March 17th of 2008, which I'll always remember. It felt like when that check cleared and hit the bank, it was like the last funding round that got done in that era. So I'm grateful to Core Capital and RRE Ventures, who led that round, David Frankel, who seeded the company and remains on our board. Those were some early bets, and I like to think that they've paid off well for those early investors.
Yeah. Well, Dunbar is one of the good ones. So good things happen to good people. I'm glad to see it. How about a little bit more about the journey of Olo before we get into it, the journey of Olo, because it started off doing one thing. And then I remember seeing a release and congrats today. I think I just saw a post. You guys hired a director of strategy, but you created Olo Pay and you have partnerships with other companies. So tell me sort of how the company's morphed and what it's doing now.
Yeah, we started out and we really built the business as a digital ordering platform for enterprise brands. So I think, Dan, you and I first met when we started working with Five Guys Burgers and Fries. It was around 2009, 2010. Now, the company started in 2005. And for the first couple of years, we're kind of wandering through the wilderness and trying to find our place. But we really found it in working with enterprise brands and helping them to build their consumer-facing platform, so their direct-to-consumer platform on top of Olo's technology. Five Guys was one of those very first enterprise customers who took a bet on Olo early, and we grew and scaled with them over the years. We then built that up at the time of our IPO, just zooming forward into 2021. So now we're 12 years into the future. We were operating at the scale of about 600 enterprise restaurant brands that had built on top of our platform, and about 64,000 individual restaurants from across those brands. Today, we're up to 700 brands on the platform and 85,000 restaurant locations. So we've continued to scale. One stat that I really like that I saw recently was looking at the sales volume of different restaurant concepts. And I believe that you posted this initially on LinkedIn, and then I responded to it, playing along as if Olo was a restaurant concept in and of ourselves, just to give you a sense of scale. I remember that the largest system-wide sales in the US was, no surprise, McDonald's. And that was something like $50 billion of annualized US sales. I believe Starbucks was number 2 at around 28 billion. Well, Olo, for that same calendar year of 2023, we processed $26 billion in what we call GMV, gross merchandise value of sales across the platform. So if you were to stack rank us like a restaurant group, we would be number 3 in overall sales. And if you think about just the digital realm, which is the only realm that we play in, we would be number 1. Because if you look at McDonald's, if you look at Starbucks, if you look at the others, nobody is doing $26 billion worth of digital sales. And that continues to grow. And it's the great tailwind behind us of the digital transformation of the industry. Along the way, we have gotten into more than just digital ordering for takeout and that skip the line experience, but also into digital ordering for delivery, so that a brand can enable their guests to order from their own direct ordering site, but specify they want the order delivered to them. And we have a whole series of partnerships with delivery service providers who then get selected to come and collect the order just in time and deliver to the guest. That's called dispatch. We enable third-party marketplaces through a product called Rails. That's another way that we play in delivery. And that's really how we came to market in our IPO in 2021. What's expanded since then is that we've added 2 big new product suites. One is Olo Pay, and that is payment processing within our own digital ordering platform. And then now also in restaurant. So payment processing for kiosk transactions is how we began that leap into the 4 walls of the restaurant. And now also payment processing on point of sale systems. Both of those things, ordering and payments, are great sources of data, of guest data. And that has become a big focus for Olo, particularly since we acquired our first company, which was a company called Wisely, one of our partners, that was at its core a guest data platform. So all of the interactions, orders, payments, email opens and clicks, surveys, loyalty use, Wi-Fi login, all of these things, reservations, waitlist, they're all digital touch points with the guest. And what Wisely, and now what we call Olo Engage, does is it pulls that all together into a guest data platform. So you have a profile on every one of your guests with every one of those digital touch points collated to that guest. And that enables you to then really personalize the guest experience for that guest, knowing what are the things that they care about, what are the products that they order, how do they modify those products, when did they come to the restaurant, how valuable are they to you as a guest. And that's really helpful for personalizing their experience and growing their value over time. It's also valuable in figuring out your menu and the best menu mix, your best locations to go and launch as you grow and scale your organization, because they correlate to high value guests for your brand, your best servers, who to give the best shifts to, et cetera. So we are maniacally focused at Olo, obsessed with guest data and gathering that guest data and turning it into guest intelligence as a way to help brands really personalize the guest experience, and in so doing, drive profitable traffic into their concepts, into their operators, into their franchisees.
So how does that work? How, for the people that don't know about Olo, you just gave a really good summary of the things that you guys do. But for someone that doesn't know Olo or is not using a tool like this, like how much better is life if they're using a tool like this? And you just mentioned all this data. Like how do they actually work with you to use the data to become more successful?
Well, to answer subjectively, life is wildly better with Olo than any alternative life without Olo. But no, truly, what we do at the core is to stand up the digital ordering platform for the brand. So a lot of brands have some interaction with guests through digital, but oftentimes I find it's only through third-party marketplaces. So they work with a DoorDash, they work with Uber Eats, they work with Grubhub, but they don't have guests that are interacting directly with the brand. And as a result, they don't get any of the data about those transactions. They don't know who that guest is. They're completely anonymous. So we're enabling brands to, on their website or on their mobile website or on their app, have that presence where a guest is creating an account with them and building that direct digital relationship with the brand. Pay is kind of folded into that as a better way of enabling payments through things like Apple Pay and Google Pay to remove the friction from the payment experience, and also to kind of satisfy a lot of the pain points that we heard from operators and franchisees about legacy payment platforms they were using. Things like, I have a low acceptance rate or a low authorization rate. I have all this fraud that's happening. I don't know what to do about it. I have these chargebacks when I have fraud where the guest contests the charge. Not only am I eating the cost of the food, but I'm also paying a penalty. That doesn't feel very good. Olo Pay has cleaned up a lot of the basics of payments, accepting payment through digital channels. And then we are working with brands to gather that guest data. Brands are swimming in data typically, but they don't have it in a usable kind of setup. They don't have it collated behind each guest. They aren't able to segment guests into the high lifetime value guests, the low lifetime value guests. Stats that are incredible still blow my mind. On average, 70% of guests that come to a restaurant never return to that restaurant. That's an industry average. And restaurant operators don't know, am I dealing right now with a guest who's a first timer who's never coming back? Or am I dealing with one of my best guests that has come 100 times in the past 10 years? They're flying blind without instruments. And the point of what we're doing in gathering this guest data and gathering behind each guest is to be able to flag this for the operator and for the frontline team of, this is Dan. He's actually one of your best guests. Here's what Dan likes when he comes here. Here's something that he's never tried before on the menu. But our data behind the scenes shows that he's a very high likelihood to love this thing. So whether you suggest that to him or you give him a free sample of that thing and maybe just create a second craving so he's coming into the brand twice as much as he used to because now he loves two things that you serve, those are the kind of insights that we can put at the fingertips of operators and the frontline team at the restaurant that really change the game in terms of, how do you up the frequency of that guest? How do you up the mix of the menu that they're interacting with? How do you ultimately grow that lifetime value of the guest? It always starts for us with ordering, then payment, and then the Engage platform is kind of how you make it a two-way street. And we call this the Olo flywheel of order and pay. They're great sources of data. Engage is how you use that data to drive more orders, more payments, and the flywheel keeps spinning faster and faster.
You mentioned lifetime value. I mean, what people don't realize is that the most profitable customer is a repeat customer. So anything that you can do to get those people, to come back more and more and more, and then they tend to wind up spending more money and they're more profitable. Yet so many people don't focus on that. You mentioned long-term value. Just explain what that means and how people should be thinking about their customers, because it's not just the $15 kava bowl.
Yeah, that's right. So lifetime value is pretty simple. It's just a measure of, if you were to look at that guest for their entire lifetime of visits to your brand, what is the profit that they're going to generate for your brand over that time? And it's a calculated field. So we can determine this based on a guest's visit frequency, their recency, and their spend. And by looking at a lookalike audience of other guests like them. But when you think about 70% of guests are never returning, that means 30% of guests are returning. How do we focus in on those guests? And then I hear brands say, oh yeah, but I've got this loyalty program. So I'm already doing something about those very loyal guests who drive so much of my business. Loyalty programs, I think, are one piece of the puzzle, but they can't be the entire strategy. They're tactical, they're not strategic. So a loyalty program, we find of the 30% of guests who are your best guests, only half of them are actively participating in a loyalty program. And a lot of the folks in the loyalty program are just there for the deals. They're actually, from a lifetime value perspective, not super valuable. They're there if you're going to give them a discount. Otherwise, they're not coming. You really need to focus on those guests that are the most valuable to the brand. And those are part of the guests who are in the loyalty program, but you uncover so many more of them if you can really see and measure every guest. And that's what the guest data platform enables you to do.
Yeah. And a somewhat recent buzzword is tech stack. So for people that don't really understand, so many people, even if you're a franchisee of Subway, which is a great big chain, and you own 2 stores, you're still only this $800,000 mom and pop, right? You're a small company. You can't just assume that they know a ton about technology and all that stuff, but explain sort of like tech stack, the modern tech stack, and how people should be thinking about technology. Like if you owned a restaurant, Noah, also, what are the non-negotiables that you would insist on? But what's the tech stack?
Yeah, I sort of break the restaurant tech stack into 2 components. One is the staff-facing tech stack, and that I think is pretty well understood. That starts with the point of sale, perhaps goes to the printers or the kitchen display system. It's where the staff is, logging in, maybe doing scheduling. Maybe it's where they're doing inventory and purchasing. That's all the staff-facing tech stack. Then you have what I think of as the guest-facing tech stack. And that's the area that we play in. And that's the area where I would argue we are the nucleus of every brand we work with, guest-facing tech stack. So it starts with anything that a guest is touching, and that can be digital ordering for takeout, can be delivery, can be a kiosk order inside the restaurant, a payment, a reservation, getting onto the wait list, logging into Wi-Fi, a loyalty program, of course, all of the stuff that you're doing with email, they're opening and clicking through, they're taking advantage of an offer. All of that is guest-facing tech. And that's where you really need to create a unified guest profile that connects all of those interactions together so you can understand who that guest is and how you can personalize not just their ordering experience, but every experience that you have. What are the messages that you send to them? What are the offers that you send to them? What's the next best action for that guest based on what you know about them and what you know about other guests that you have in your database? So we don't do that alone as Olo. I talked about Order, Pay, Engage as our 3 big product suites. Within those, we have 16 different modules. We also have a lot of partners. We have 400 integrated technology partners who are specialists in a lot of different areas that brands care about. If you really care about surveys, we have a lot of different companies that do surveys. If you care about third-party delivery, we've got a lot of delivery partners. If you care about building a front-end experience that's truly bespoke for your brand, we have a lot of front-end development partners, and on and on and on. And really, all of those partners, what they have in common is that guest-facing kind of focus. And we, as Olo, serve as the nucleus of that guest experience and the unified guest profile for an individual guest. And that connects into everything that we do with our library of 400 integrated partners. And I think that at this point, those 700 enterprise brands and 85,000 restaurants and the 400 integrated technology partners in what is an open platform, that's the largest ecosystem for enterprise restaurants out there. So a lot of brands see that and come to us and say, I'm starting with putting Olo in place and then building around that to really build out my guest-facing tech stack.
What are some of the other pieces of tech companies should insist on having? Like if you had a restaurant other than Olo, but like what are some of the other things that people need to have?
Yeah, I think one interesting thing that I thought you were going to ask is just the interplay of the guest facing versus the staff facing. One thing that we're seeing, which is interesting, is that brands are asking the question, probably for the first time, do I really need to make the same investments in my staff facing tech stack? Do I need a point of sale in the traditional sense that I have needed for decades and decades? Or could I have a brand that's operating in a totally guest-centric manner, all on the guest-facing tech stack? So an example of this, we have a customer in Honeygrow, and Honeygrow is doing 100% of their transactions through the Olo platform and 100% of their payments through the Olo platform. The reason for that is they're using us for takeout and delivery, and they're using us as the kind of underpinning of their kiosk inside the restaurant. Shake Shack, another example of this. Every transaction is running through the Olo platform because when you go into a Shake Shack, you're ordering from the kiosk. You can go and order from a cashier who will help you to put the order in, but typically that's how the order is being placed. So the kind of power dynamics or the weighting between what has been a traditionally POS focused business, this restaurant business, that is shifting toward the guest facing tech stack and the guest experience. And I think along with that, how do you personalize that experience and make the guest feel like I'm a segment of one, this is personalized just for me? And in sort of industry terms, I feel like a regular. I feel like I'm getting hospitality. This brand knows me. They know what I like. That's what we're trying to unlock and make possible at whatever scale the restaurant enterprise is operating at.
Yeah. And I know so many people resist technology like the online ordering or working with the delivery companies. They try to avoid it because of the cost. What's your response to that? Because it's obviously the most successful chains do it. So there must be something there. But what are people missing thinking that it's just too expensive, it's not worth it?
Well, I think they might be conflating third-party digital through third-party marketplaces versus direct digital. So Olo, again, is sort of primarily focused on enabling a brand to do its own direct digital platform. It is expensive to work with third-party marketplaces. You pay 20, 25, 30% commissions to them, and you don't get any of the guest data. That's very expensive. That might be your entire profit margin as a franchisee. With direct digital, you're not typically paying a commission in that way. You're paying a flat fee per month per store. You might be paying some small transaction fee. But I heard one of our customers, and I'm going to misquote him here, but he was basically comparing Olo to an employee. He said, Olo is my best employee. It's the most productive, and I only have to pay it 4 cents an hour or something like that, when he compared it to digital order taking versus order taking from a cashier inside the restaurant. So I think from that perspective, you think about a platform that's enabling you to do more business and be more productive, do more with less labor, and at the same time enables you to use the co-product of those transactions, the data, to personalize the guest experience and drive more frequency and greater spend from those guests. It more than pays for itself, and very, very quickly. And I think brands then have the option. Do they also then want to work with third-party marketplaces that can maybe drive additional business in? We always say, make that the second consideration. The first consideration should be, how do I stand up the best direct digital channel so that my loyal guests can forge that direct relationship with my brand?
Yeah. Any thoughts or any coaching that you guys do for your clients? So they sign up with you, they go through the program. Now they start getting online orders, and the things that they do that piss customers off. So like not having the order ready, not being accurate, it's sort of like even like Uber, right? I order Uber and it tells me that guy's score. Well, there's a score on me.
Yeah.
Right. And then so, we know that these delivery companies, like they hammer you if you're got a restaurant that's hard to get to, or you're constantly late or whatever, you're going to get dinged for. So what are some things that people should do to be better at the back end fulfillment?
Yeah, I'd say we really try to take a lot of the guesswork and the difficulty out of the process by coding it into the product itself. And I'll give you an example of that. If I know that a burger at Five Guys, just to stick with that example, takes on average 7 minutes to prepare, and I know that Dan wants to pick it up at 1 o'clock today, it makes no sense if it's 11 in the morning for me to fire that in and assume that somebody is going to look at the ticket and remember to start making it at 12:53. It would be better if the system held that order and then fired it into the production line at 12:53. So the person starts making the order at 1 o'clock. Dan walks in. The order is not just ready, but it's hot and fresh and ready. That's something that we built into our platform in the earliest days with customers like Five Guys. And that served us well, especially when delivery became a bigger part of the mix of digital orders, because to your point, delivery drivers do that for a living, and time is money for those guys. When they come into a restaurant and the order is not ready, they're pissed, and they let it be known. And it's a bad experience then for your staff getting yelled at by a delivery driver. It makes a scene for your guests of somebody yelling at your staff. They also don't like to show up and have the order been sitting there for a long time, and then they hand it to the guest and the order is cold and gross and inedible. So that idea of how do you synchronize the driver's arrival or the guest's arrival with the order being ready and fresh has been a huge focus of ours from the very beginning. And we've done some things recently using AI and machine learning to really dial in, okay, this burger is actually not 7 minutes. This burger has some additional elements to it, which make it 7.5 minutes. So instead of 12:53, fire this thing at 12:52 and 30 seconds. That's going to be ready. Based on what's happening in the kitchen at the moment, based on what's in that order, based on the time of day, these are really helpful signals for us to use with machine learning to perfect the order ready time. And so I'm very proud of the work that we're doing there. It's sort of like a less sexy use of AI. Everyone wants to talk about voice AI in the drive-thru, and that is an exciting space. But I love when AI just makes it work better and takes some of the lift and the pressure off of an already very pressured kitchen team or frontline team inside the restaurant. And that's been a guiding principle, is we want to be like the easy button that you hit and everything just works well.
Yeah. Customers so badly just want what they order, right? They want what they order. They want the hot food, hot, cold food, cold. We're partners in a couple brands. One's Rise, that they use hot lockers, cold lockers, right? Rise biscuits, donuts. And so if you get a biscuit sandwich, that thing's sweating a lot, right? You got hot chicken, hot whatever, and then it's in this, biscuit and a wrapper. And if you hold that in an air-conditioned place, it's just going to water out. So they hold it at temperature. They hold it at a hot temperature. So those are things that I think people can do. If you're going to ask people to order online and come in and pick it up, it better be right when they pick it up, right? And so any thoughts on, I'm on the NRA board, and I know this is a hot topic about tech fees and where tech fees are going. And what do you have any thoughts or comments on tech fees?
Say more about that. What do you mean by tech fees?
So like the delivery company fees, right? The Uber Eats and those kind of guys. Like, do you see those getting under control? I mean, I'm going to ask you the same question about credit card fees too.
Well, I think I thought you were going to define tech fees differently, which is the brand, the franchisor charging tech fees of franchisees for the technology that they are building and maintaining in-house. I think that's a really big issue as well.
Yeah, that is a new thing, because I remember doing franchising before there was the internet. You had no line item for tech fees. Now tech fees are almost like a royalty fee.
Totally. It's like royalty, ad fund, tech fee. It's like a third line item. And so I have a lot to say about that as well. First, on the third-party marketplaces, years ago when these guys first came onto the scene, I drew the analogy of like, this is like hotels versus the OTAs, the online travel agents. It's like Marriott versus Priceline and Expedia all over again. And I said, like, if we just look at what happened there are some really important lessons that restaurants should heed about what to do and what not to do, how to build those direct relationships with guests so that you're less dependent upon driving transactions through third-party marketplaces. Some restaurants heard that from me or from others who were screaming from the top of our lungs and did a really good job building a strong direct digital program, many, many restaurants, probably more restaurants, said like, well, okay, I don't know. I'm just going to start working with these guys. And it's become very seductive to do a little bit more and a little bit more. And now put a little bit more into the advertising tools that the different marketplaces offer to drive more transactions. And again, that is very short-term thinking to just put money into the advertising platform that is the third-party marketplace to drive transactions, but that come at that 20 to 30% commission cost and where you don't get any data about who that guest is. It's something that you and I have talked about before, Dan, which is there's a mismatch in incentives. There's misaligned incentives between franchisor and franchisee in this way, where the franchisor, well, they make their royalties on top line. So they want to just drive as many transactions as they can. And one way of doing that, of course, there's deals and value menus and all of that. But another way is put money from the ad fund, which of course comes from franchisees, into third-party marketplace ad tools to drive these transactions. That comes at a really high cost. That erodes profitability when you take out the commissions from the franchisees. So it's the kind of thing that great for the franchisor. They get to keep their job. They make their number. Not good for the franchisee, and also not good for the guest's value perception of the brand. So I think that the brands that are really focused on how do I build up this audience of guests who are loyal to my brand, where I can drive traffic from those guests in a profitable manner in a way that's healthy for my franchisees and my brand overall, they're going to not just survive, but thrive going forward. Those brands who have now become increasingly more and more dependent on third-party marketplaces, it's a road to ruin ultimately. And I wish if I could put a bug in the ear of restaurant analysts, I would say, like, don't stop at just asking what percentage of your sales are digital. Ask specifically, how much of your sales overall is direct digital and how much is coming from marketplaces? Because you could say we're 50% digital. If that's all coming from marketplaces, you are in trouble. But if you're doing a lot of your sales through guests who are engaging with you directly, building up their relationship, building up what you know about them because they're ordering directly from you, that's awesome. You're building an enduring brand for decades to come.
Yeah. Hey, so let's shift gears a little bit. Talk to me about the trends. If you think about the restaurant industry 10 years ago and 10 years from now, what's sort of the restaurant of the future?
Yeah, I know you and I share a passion for restaurants that are very off-premise focused. And I've shared the story with you, but I got to give a speech in 2014 in Dublin at an event called Web Summit. And the prompt was exactly this. It was, what is the restaurant of the future? What's that going to look like? And I wanted to be a little bit provocative in my thesis statement. And so I said, the restaurant of the future, it's going to be a kitchen with a pickup window. And that's it. No dining room. Because the way that growth is happening in this industry is it's all driven by off-premise, takeout, delivery, now catering. It's not going to be inside the four walls of the restaurant. Of course, drive-through, a huge and enduring part of this industry. And it's been really fascinating to 10 years later see great manifestations of that prophecy back from 2014 of, brands like Sour & Go, brands like Dutch Bros, brands like Seven Brew, et cetera, that are building out kitchens with pickup windows, whether that's drive-through only or drive-through and takeout and delivery for digital orders. And it's been fascinating to watch traditional brands experiment with this. So I'm very excited I get to serve on the board of Portillo's, fantastic company, great Olo customer. They have started to do some locations that are called Portillo's Pickup. And they are just like this. There's no dining room. They're just focused on drive-through, takeout, and delivery only. And I think you're going to see more of that going forward. Is that going to be the entire industry? Of course not. There's always going to be people who want to go and sit inside the four walls of the restaurant. fine dining experiences, any sort of table service experience, that makes sense. But increasingly, if you look at transaction count and sales mix of this industry, it is shifting towards those off-premise transactions. And I think that's part of this larger trend where restaurants are gaining share on grocery. I'm sure you see this at the National Restaurant Association when you look at about $2 trillion a year spent on food in America. And it used to be that 15% of the total was restaurant and 85% was grocery. Well, now for the first time in recent years, restaurants have passed $1 billion in food sales and are now larger than grocery. It's above 50-50. Restaurants are now the larger of the two. And I think that's going to continue. And I think what that reflects is people are spending less time cooking for themselves. They're spending more time getting food that's prepared for them by restaurants. And I think that's why you see this growth in off-premise and what's driving the restaurant performance relative to the grocery performance, and what's leading to the growth in our industry.
Yeah. And when I was a kid, when I was even in my early 20s, off-premise was calling the pizza place on the phone, ordering food and going and picking it up, or calling. The idea that people like my parents would order on their phone before COVID, never. Now only, right? Yeah. So like you have to meet customers where they are, and more it's pervasive now that you got people that are doing everything on their phone. Maybe to the point where they don't like people, they don't want to talk to people. But if you're not doing it, you're sort of out.
Well, you're right, and you also have to meet people where they are for that older guest who does want to order through the phone. And we've done a lot of work with call centers and enabling them with a tool that we offer called Switchboard, which basically enables that guest, like your parents before COVID, maybe, to call in. They call the store's phone number. We can see who's calling in, pull up their accounts, ask if they want the thing they got last time, and then put that order into the restaurant like it was a digitally placed order. And that is a really cool thing because it basically is an on-ramp into the digital experience. You can send an e-receipt to that guest and you can say, hey, Dan Rowe's parents, next time you can order online. You can order from a mobile app. Here's an easy, a few clicks process to replace that order. Credit card on file, favorite order on file, etc. And so it's a great way of exposing people who might not know yet about digital ordering to the benefits of digital ordering. And as you said, a lot of that comes down to convenience and accuracy and just giving them that on-demand experience that we all have seen in every other facet of our life.
Yeah, and it gives you reasons to market. Like, do you remember, it was a while ago, but you guys did the Shake Shack Shake app or whatever it was. Didn't you do an app for ordering shakes from Shake Shack? It's like stuff like that makes you just want to do it because it sounds fun.
Yeah.
That's good. Any other examples where people are using technology to drive more revenue, more profit?
Well, I'm going to stick with the Five Guys example because it's such a fun one for me. It's been a customer that we worked with now for over 15 years. And as you well know, we don't do marketing, right? Five Guys has never had to do marketing. It's all word of mouth. Like the phenomenal success of that brand is all word of mouth. For the first time, we were talking to Five Guys about our Engage platform and all of this guest data that we have access to over our 15-year history as a digital ordering platform. So Five Guys said, okay, we're going to work with 150 of our locations for 6 months. We're going to start to harvest these profiles. When a guest puts their hand up and says, I want to be known by Five Guys, I want to create an account, and I want to hear from you. In 6 months, at 150 locations, 4.5 million accounts got created in the guest data platform. And they use that not to send out deals and promotions and discounts. That's not what Five Guys does. They just sent them an email saying, hey, Dan, we know that you like shakes, and here are the different shakes that we offer, and we'd love if you came in and ordered a shake. Simple. But that drove $2 million in incremental sales that they attribute to those emails that came from collecting that data. So when I think about what's happening in our industry, everybody's struggling for traffic. Everybody's looking for how do we drive traffic. They're doing the traditional things of value menus, deals, discounts, bombing price, pouring money into third-party marketplaces to drive traffic. It reminds me of the daily deals companies, Living Social, Groupon, 10 years ago. It's very, very short-term oriented. And again, it's good for the franchisor. They make their royalties. It's bad for the franchisee and their profitability. That leads to bankruptcies. And it also resets the value perception for the guest. I think the best brands are taking this guest data that's available to them as a co-product of this digital transformation, and they're using tools like Engage to really personalize messaging to those guests who want to hear from the brand and drive profitable traffic from those guests. I think that is the better way, and that's what we're hyper-focused on as a company, of enabling, again, this thing that we see in every other facet of our experience as consumers and guests. When you go to Netflix, you get recommendations for shows. That's based on what you've watched and other guests like you, other customers like you. Spotify works this way. Amazon, YouTube, Google. Our whole life is about the data that's known about us by these service providers shaping our experience and personalizing our experience. We're just doing that for the first time really ever in this restaurant industry. And I think it is not a vitamin, but a painkiller at this moment, because it's the kind of thing that drives healthy, profitable traffic, not this sort of short-term sugar rush traffic that ultimately erodes the brand itself.
Yeah. No, this is great, man. I appreciate it. I thank you so much. This was, some really good insights. You're very efficient with the way that you talk, and I appreciate that. But you gave me some good insights. I didn't, until we started talking, I didn't originally know the chasm difference between you and marketplaces as much, right? And so that was helpful to understand the fact that a customer of yours, actually gets to use the data, gets to know their data, customer data, where you don't with the third parties, which is a big pain point. So, and I love that you use Five Guys as your example. That brand's near and dear to my heart. So
I know it. Well, it's what's bonded us together, and what an amazing ride to be on with that brand over these 15 years.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much. I appreciate it. Where can people find out more about you if they want to follow along, learn more about you and Olo?
Olo website's easy, olo.com. You can find Olo on X at Olo, or me on X at NHGlass, and very frequent posters on LinkedIn as well, and some fun interactions with Dan Rowe posts about restaurant sales and whatnot as well. So look for that as a good example.
All right. Thank you so much. I appreciate it, and I will see you soon. Hopefully I'll see you soon.
Thanks, Dan. Take care.
Hey, thanks for tuning in to Smart Franchising with FranSmart. I'm your host, Dan Rowe. If you enjoyed today's episode, this podcast is only going to get better. Please like, comment, and subscribe to hear more from the most successful franchisors and franchisees, and we'll see you next time.